Hello, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to cover how to create the basic or first multi-dimensional SSAS cube. Before we go into that, just I want to quickly recap what we discussed in the previous video, which is data modeling or dimensional modeling of facts and dimension. You can see here, this is the video that we discussed in the previous session. But if at all you're directly coming to this video, I would request you to go back and have a look at this video, because that will be your starting point to create the facts and dimensions in the database. Once you complete that, if you jump into this video will be quite easy to digest the information what I'm referring. But again, so whatever these videos, why I'm saying this, for the beginners it's difficult to find out the flow, right? Which video is first and which video they need to go last, right? For that reason, I'm just suggesting that go back to these facts and dimensions video and then come back to this video, so that it's easy to understand the multidimensional cube. Let's get into started how we create the multidimensional cube. Now, so let's go back to our database. This is the where I created our facts and dimensions, and here we have the totally 6 dimensions and one fact table. And these are the basic attributes that we added to the each dimension. That's about these fact tables and dimension tables. Now we'll connect to this database and create our multi-dimensional cube. Let's get started. So now I'm opening the Visual Studio in my local. So let me open the Visual Studio. So to create the multi-dimensional SSAS cube, so Visual Studio, we need to install within the Visual Studio. We need to install the SQL Server analysis plugin. Okay, it's a part of your business intelligence plugins. Once you install the Visual Studio, in the previous versions, we completely installed the data tool pack. But now, from 2016 onwards, Microsoft separated the data tools individually. So, if you want only the SSAS, then you can install on the SSAS Business Intelligence tool or SSIS tool or SSRS tool. That likewise you can, whichever the plugin you require, you can install individually. That's the very good thing in recent versions. Now, let me create the first project. So to do that, you need to go to the create a new project. Under the new project, so you'll see two options. Okay, if you since it's in the recent project templates, it's appearing here. But if you're not sure whether the SSAS is installed, you can search with SSAS. It's not there, and let me search with SQL Server analysis. Now you can see here I got the list of the options related to the SQL Server analysis. In my local, I have installed both multidimensional and tabular cube. From here, what I'll do, so here I want to create the analysis service project. I don't want to import it. Why I'm not getting the normal project? Let me search it this way, and multi-dimensional. There you go. So this is the one I need to use to create the new project, which is analysis service data multi-dimensional data mining project. I click that and click next, and then I'll give my project name, which is the I would say retail cube. Okay, that's my uh, name, and I don't change any locations. I will use the same default location. But in your scenario, if you want to store this entire project into your desired location, you can change the location and go ahead and save it. But now I'm keeping only my default location, right? So now once I make all these necessary changes, then I click create. Now my project got created in the Visual Studio. So you can see here, and then on the Solution Explorer, and you can see these are the list of the folders or like modules that we are going to work now. So the basic cube is completed, this project solution created, and now first thing we need to create the data source. The data source will let you build the connection between the analysis service engine and your database engine. So creating the data source is mandatory, and it will be your first step. Now I'm creating the new data source, create data source based on the another object. I click that option, click next, and then here you will have two options: create database based on the existing data source in your solution. But I don't have an existing solution, so I need to create a new one. Okay, so here I need to create the project level data source. Now click next, and then it will ask so any specific username and password to be used to deploy the cube. So for now, we'll use the credentials of the current user. That is the option. Otherwise, you can mention any username and password to deploy the cube, right? So for now, I keep my credentials to deploy the cube. And click next, and then the data source name, you can give it whichever the data source name you want to give it, you can give it, and then finish. After that, so go ahead, and then here it's taking the data source default, right? But that's the not I want. Okay, I'm not able to read it. Let me cancel, and then let me try to delete, and I think something I wrongly selected. Let me try again. New data source. Click next. Based on the existing or new connection. Sorry, I supposed to select this option instead of this option. I selected this. That's the reason it went wrong. So I'll click new, and here I'll enter my database connection, the connection server name. This is the server name and our instance name that we need to pass it. And I paste it here, and then I select my database test connection. Click OK. Now my database is created. Here I use credentials of the current user, and then click next, and then my data source name is the same of the POC. I didn't change anything. You can see whether it's a build or not by clicking this, double clicking on the data source. You can see one more time whether the server name and database name is correct, and then click test connection. Once the test connection is succeeded, we are good that the data source connection is created. Now moving on. So the next step is we need to create the data source view. Data source view is actually help you to onboard your necessary tables from your database to the cube. Let's say you have the 500 tables in your database. All 500 tables we don't use for the cube design, right? Out of the 500 tables, we might use hardly like 10 dimensions or 5 fact tables, something like that. But in our scenario, we take one fact table and 6 dimensions from our database. So now I'm going to add those tables into my data source view. So if the table is not added in this data source view, you cannot refer or cannot use that particular table anywhere in this cube solution. So first, any table that you have a dependency within the cube, you need to bring the table into your data source view. Let's go and create the data source. I click the new create data source, and then I use the existing relational data source, which we created in our previous step, which is the POC. Click next. Once you do that, so it will ask whether as soon as the tables, right, the required tables that we drag it, so do you want to enable the relationship? That's the option it's asking. If the same name as the primary keys, we tell them, okay, let's do your automatic relationship enablement so that the cube intelligence will do that for you. Otherwise, you can do it manually. That's not a problem. Once you create the data source, you can modify your relationship whichever way you want. Okay. Now, for now, I keep default option. I don't change anything. Click next, and then here are my tables. So from here, I need to bring all my dimensions, 6 dimensions. Then I can select at a time and drag it to the right side, and then my fact table, drag it to the right side, and then click next, and then the data source view name, which name I want to keep it, I will not change anything. I'll keep it POC as my data source view. Now I'll click finish. That's it. Now the data source view is created, and then our facts and dimensions are loaded to data source view or queue. Now you can enable the relationship here. So I'll go to the fact table here, and under the fact cells, I'll have relationships. Right click on the relationship, new relationship. So your foreign key table will be fact table, and then your dimension table will be the buyer customer. So the relationship between the fact sales and buyer customer is buyer customer code. Now let's select the buyer customer code as a foreign key, and here also we do the buyer customer code as our primary key. So if you want to describe this relationship, you can narrate anything here, and click OK. Okay, now it's asking the buyer dimension doesn't have any primary key. Whatever the column that we selected as a primary key, the logical key was not created in the data source view. That's what it's telling, this warning about it. You can say yes. If it say yes, then it's automatically create the buyer customer code as the logical primary key. If it is not created, then you can select that option, set logical primary key. Okay, that's not a problem. Let me do that. So for seller geo key code, I'll set as a logical primary key, and for fact sales not required because that is a foreign key. And then time dimension, we need to create a transaction date will be our primary key that I defined. And here again for seller dimension, seller customer code is our primary key. For this product column will be our logical primary key, and then last table is geo table. Let me bring that to here. So for the geo table, buyer geo code will be our primary key. So now I set the all primary keys. Now I'll go ahead and enable the relationship. I'll keep it in this way so that our cube, whatever the fact sales cube that we are going to create here, it will be like a star schema. You see, the fact is centered and surrounds other dimension table, and this is called star schema. Now I'm going to start enabling the relationship between the fact table and other dimension table. Now this time I'll use the buyer geo. So the join condition between the fact table and buyer geo is buyer geo country code, buyer geo code. So now let me select the buyer geo code and click OK. So the second relationship created. Now, and then here, so other dimension is product dimension. So between the fact and the product, the key is product, and the primary key here also product. Click OK. This one is created, new relationship. And then next dimension will be seller customer. So for seller customer, we join with the seller customer code between the two tables. Click OK. And then new relationship again. So this time we use the seller geo. So seller geo code will be the common between the two systems. Okay, click OK. And then next one is time dimension. So the time dimension, it will use the transaction date to join the two tables. Click OK. So now you see this is our star schema. We can, you know, you can see here it's entirely appears like a star schema, right? So if at all you have any other dimension, further dimension is depending further down, then you call it snowflake. But for now, since we are working on the simple cube, let's stick into the star schema. Now our relationships are created. Now we need to start creating the dimensions first. Am I missing anything? No. So I think I added the table, enable the all dimensions linkage. Now I'm going to create the dimension. So now here, right click on the dimension here, the folder, and click on new dimension. Click next. So we need to use an existing table from our data source view. And then here first we'll create the buyer customer. For the buyer customer code will be our key. It's selected automatically. Click next. And if you want all the columns to be part of your cube browser, you can select here. But data load timestamp, it's not related to the business, it's more related to track from our end. So I don't want to expose this column to end user. So I'll keep only the buyer customer code and buyer customer name. Next, and then I can give the name, any name of this dimension. I don't change anything. So let's keep dim buyer customer and then finish. That's it. Your dimension is created. So if the column is available on the right side in here and which is not available in here on the left side, that means that particular column will not be exposed to the user. In our scenario, data load timestamp will not be exposed to the user. Only the buyer customer code and buyer customer name will be visible for the user for his reporting purpose. Now let's quickly create the remaining dimensions. Again, I click new dimension, use an existing table, and this time I select the buyer geo and the primary key, everything is set it up. So buyer geo code is selected as a key column, and then here I want to select buyer geo code and buyer subregion and buyer region name, and then click next, and then keep the same dimension name in buyer geo finish. Now my buyer geo dimension created. Now moving on, next dimension I'm creating, and here I choose same options, and then I change the product is the key column, primary key column. Along with that, we want to use product line, model name, subcategory, category for my reporting purpose. Click next and keep the same name, dim product, and that's it. Product dimension created. Next one is the another dimension, and here also we use an existing table. This time we select the seller customer. Seller customer code is our primary key, and then here I want to bring only seller customer code and seller customer name for user, and then click next, and then keep same name, finish. And similarly, again, we create the dimension for seller geo. Seller geo code is our primary key, and here I want to display the seller geo country, subregion, and region. Click next. Keep the same name of the dimension, finish. And then the last dimension that we are going to create is time dimension. So time dimension, and here transaction date is our primary key, and then click next. Here I want to have all the columns except data load timestamp. When I want to have all the columns, you can click here. This is the button, right? So now I am excluding the data load timestamp, which is not required for my reporting purpose. Click next, and time dimension is created. So now we are good with 6 dimensions. Our next step is we need to create the cube. So now we're going to create the new cube. Click next, and it's asking whether we want to use the existing tables or create an empty queue or generate tables in the data source. But for our scenario, since our fact table is already defined in the SQL database, we'll use the existing tables. And then click next, and here we select the fact sales as our measure group. Click next, and then all these measures, when this measure group is created within the cube, so all these measures will be added to the cube. So if you don't want anything, you can uncheck. That's not a problem, but I'll keep it as it is. Click next. And since I already created the dimensions on the right side, I don't need to create dimensions again so that I can uncheck this option. But in case if you don't create the dimensions first, and if you're directly creating the cube, then you need to select this option so that the cube will create the dimensions along with your cube. But our scenario, we already created. That's the reason I excluded this option. And then click next. And here also, I can uncheck this. Oh, okay. So this is the whatever the dimension that we created here. These dimensions again we need to bring into inside of the cube. That's the option. This option will help you to do that. Click next, and then my cube name won't change. I'll keep it same cube name POC finish. That's it. Our cube, everything is created. Oh, so it seems the dimensions created again because of that option that we selected. Let me delete it. These dimensions. Okay, now so dimensions are removed from here. What you can, don't worry if the dimensions are get deleted, right? So you can right click here, add cube dimension, and again you can select all of them. Click OK. These are our original dimension that we created, right? So we added them instead of using the system generated dimension because we made a lot of changes here, right? We don't want all the columns get displayed, and we did some you know limitations here, right? These columns and all. So that's the reason we use our dimension instead of the system generated dimensions. Now our dimensions and fact measure group is created in the cube. We are good. So now you can one more time cross verify whether your relationship or your fact table and dimensions are correct by going through this dimension usage tab. So now if you click on this dot button, three dots, you can see what is the relationship between the facts and dimension, which other columns are joined here. Since we already enabled these relationship within the data source view, it's automatically taking that reference while we create the cube. In case, if you don't enable any relationship within the data source view, then you need to do manually here. So all these relationships, you need to enable it here. But that's not a mandatory to enable the relationship within the data source view. But in cube side, here is the mandatory to enable the relationship between the facts and dimension. This is the where the user will browse the data. That's the reason here you need to enable the relationship. But to have like a standard solution or standard methodology, it's a good practice to enable the relationship within the data source view. That will help you a lot. Moving on, so now data we created the measure group and everything is good. So our cube is ready now, and then we're going to deploy the cube. So to deploy the cube, and then we need to do some properties settings in the solution. So here, if you go to the solution name, retail cube, right click on it, and here you will have the properties. So in your properties, you can choose which version of the server that you are using. In my scenario, I'm using the developer version, and then the development server version is 15, so I don't want to change anything. Then I go to the deployment here. I need to select deploy all, and then where I want to deploy, I need to give my OLAP Cube server name. So in our scenario, let me check what is our OLAP Cube server name. So it is our localhost, and then use the same. There is no change. I'll keep retail cube, and then apply. Now we are good with the all properties setting. Now let's deploy the cube. So to deploy the cube, what we do, so we select all these dimensions first, and then right click on this all dimension and click on the process, and then it will ask you, it will just give a warning. So the, so deploy cube is not available in the system, and you want to deploy the project first, and then you click yes, and first it will deploy the cube, the entire dimension structure. Then it will ask. It will choose the process option by automatically. So since we are deploying the first time, we're going to deploy these dimensions in the process full mode. Okay, so then we talk about the different process option later, but for now, we deploy these dimensions in process full. Now click on run. Then now our dimensions are deployed. Now the next one is we're going to deploy the cube. So process, and then yes, because the cube does not exist, first it needs to be deployed, and then it will process. So now the structure is deploying now. The cube structure you can see on this deployment progress window. Now the cube structure is deployed successfully. Then click on run. So here you need to process the cube data. Now see there is some problem. So the date value, it seems there is a format issue in our time dimension. Now let me quickly go there and see what is the format of the data that I have in the database and then time dimension. Now let me go to the fact table and then access, and here I have the dates. So the dates in which format? Transaction date, it's in YY, it's in YYY and MMDD format. Now let me see in the time dimension what I have. I mean, basically the error that you see, it's telling that there is a key that exists in the fact table, but it's missing in the dimension table. So the foreign key and primary key violation error that we got it. Now I'm just checking the format of the time column between the two tables. So now I'm checking with the dim time, see what is the format of my time dimension. Okay, so here distinct, and then here also I have a transaction date. Right, so now here do I have right, what is the date? Oh, here 2010 data, but here it seems we don't have 2010. Now what I'll do, I'll simply update my fact table dates. Okay, update, because the fact table data that I have, it is belongs to the 2010 year, but we don't have that records in our time dimension. So either I can insert these missing keys in my time dimension, which will be the tedious task, right? Now what I'll do, I'll simply update these records by changing the year. I'll do update the transaction date. Okay, set transaction date equals to these three values. What I'll do, I will change this to 2022, where my transaction date is this value. Okay, similarly, I'll do for other two rows also. Okay, for this record, 30th and 31st, and here also, I think we are good. So this is the 30th, and this is the 31st. We are good. We're just changing the year. That's it. It's good. Now it's updated the year of my transaction date. Now let's click on reprocessing the cube. That's it. The cube is deployed. So, right, our cube is deployed. Once you deploy the cube, you can browse the cube here by clicking on the browser tab, and then you can drag your measures here, and then you can also see whether they are populating or not. So, from the measure group, I drag the three measures, and then I select transaction date. So it's working well. Now, the same thing, the same way you can browse in SSMS. Let me refresh here. So the cube is deployed. It is our cube retail cube, and then you click on the cube, expand the cubes and browse. And here you can do your check here also, and selecting which are the columns you want, and then you can connect and then click execute. This is the SSMS. Even you can do browse the cube from Excel. Basically, cube is very famous for browsing the data in Excel. You know, the Excel and SSAS OLAP cube both are very close friends. Okay, they have a good understanding in terms of the reporting the data. From the Excel, how do you connect to your cube? So go to the data tab in Excel and then click on get data. From here, you can choose the from database. Under the from database, choose from analysis service. And here, you need to give your analysis service server name. In our scenario, it's a local host. If you already have the access to the cube, you automatically use your Windows authentication to connect to the cube. Click next. And then here, choose your cube, which are the cube you want to browse. So in our scenario, we use our retail cube to browse. Under that, the list of the cubes, whatever you created in your Visual Studio here, right? The cubes, these cubes will be displayed here. Now I want to select this POC cube, click next, and then finish. After that, you can build, you can perform these options: pivot table report, or pivot chart, or only create the connection. But for us, pivot table report is the right option. Click next, and then your queue. columns are appearing here. Now you choose which are the measures you want to select, and then you can select whichever columns you want, and also you can select whichever the time frame, which are the attribute from whichever the dimension, you can select it. This is how you browse the cube, and this is how you first deploying the cube. I mean, again, so I didn't mention any properties. It's a purely plain and simple deployment for the beginners, whoever interested to learn this cube. This is your first step. With this achievement, we can further move on and then discuss how we can process the cube. Now we have the static data that we inserted manually, and we deploy the cube and we process the data. But what will happen if you get the more data into the cube on day-to-day basis? How do you process your, how do you push the data from your fact table to the cube? That I'm going to talk about in the next step. So to process the fresh data to the cube, there will be number of ways. Okay, but in this video, we're going to talk about two options. Okay, so the one is manual process that you can do it by going here, right click on this cube solution, click on the cube solution, and then process. When you do that process selection, you will get options of the process option with full. Okay, so you can do click OK so that it will get process your dimensions and your fact table. So if the latest data is available in your database, it will bring the fresh data to your queue. This is the one approach. And if you want to create kind of job that can take care of it, what you can do, so you can right click on uh, dimension and click on process, and then generate a script. When you click that option, it will generate XML script, and you go ahead, you copy this script, and then go to your SQL agent. I'm not sure whether the SQL agent is enabled in my system. Let me see whether I can start. uh, I've seen some problem. Okay, good, my SQL agent is enabled. Now here you can create your new job, and process my by your customer dimension. And then under the steps, you can create a new step, and then you can choose process by your customer. That will be your step name. Under the type, you can select SQL Server Analysis Service command, and then you can use the account SQL Server Agent Service account, and here you need to put your server name, localhost, and then paste your XML script that you copied from here. That's it. So once you're done with your setting, then click OK, and then right click and execute this job. Okay, so there might be some issues with authentication, but this is how you need to execute your process your cube through the SQL agent. And you can also use your SSAS packages to process your cube. Okay, and then moving on, so here you will have a, let's discuss on the different process option. So process options, you will have a totally six process options. One is the process default. Process default is actually it will identify what is the state of that particular dimension, the process state of the dimension, then it will take care of it. Processful is actually, it will do process the fresh data as well as creating the index. And generally, if you don't know whether the data is processed or index is rebuilt or not, the process default is the best option, so that it will take, the queue will take care of it for behalf of you. And processful, it will take care of completely processing the data and then creating the index. Process clear is, it will empty your entire dimension in the cube. And process data is only just, it will take the latest data, it won't create any indexes. Process index is, it will create only indexes. Whatever the data that is available in the dimension, it's only create the index. Process update is actually, it's only do the delta processing. If the record is already exists in the dimension, and then it won't touch, but if all the new records or all new updated records will get processed in the queue by using the process update. So for dimensions alone, all the time choose the process update. That will be ideal option to do the cube dimension processing. Okay, so that's about process option at dimension level. When it come to the cube level, the process options will be the different, little different, not entirely different. So here we'll have a similar option: process default, process full, process data, process structure. Process structure is nothing but whenever you process any fresh measure. Today you added some measure in here in your measure group under here, but tomorrow if you're going to add one more measure, new measure here, that is the structural changes, right? Those scenarios, you can use the process structure option. And process clear, it will clear entire data from the measure group. Process index is only creating the index. Process add is, it keeps the existing data and add the fresh data. It's kind of versioning. It will keep existing data and start processing the fresh data from the queue. Using this option, sometimes you get the duplication. Careful when using the process side. So the other option, do you need to process entire cube even though if you don't have any changes in particular measure group? No, not like that. You will have a option to process individual measure group. Under this measure group, you have the fact sales now. Similarly, you will have different measure groups. When you have those measure groups, you can process your data based on your individual measure group. When you want to do the individual measure group processing, you can right click on your measure group name and click on the process. Again, the same process option will appear here. So that's about how you process the data in the queue. So with this process option, so we are good building and processing our cube on day-to-day basis. So we are ready with our first multi-dimensional cube with basic dimensions and basic measures. That's about our first MOLAB cube journey. It's a basic cube. And the next upcoming videos, I'm going to cover what are the options, what are the properties. It's like a more little advanced, how you can rename your dimension column name, how you can create the calculations, if you need customized calculations, how you can create a customized calculation, how you can add the new column in the data source view. So those topics will cover in the next advanced topic. So that's all for now. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.